medicine have been but for the invention of plastic was the theme he expounded on for the next 15 or 20 minutes. And of course, I told myself instantly, though I didn't believe it, that it's not time yet, that there's no immediate danger, that the medical prognosis of 6 months that he'd been given would hold. At some level, we'd both have known this wasn't true, but we had to still talk as though it was. It was a conversation that left me feeling the same way every conversation with Mike had ever left me feeling. He was as scintillating as ever, more so even. He talked about the connection between beauty and terror, the properly uncanny, inhuman element in all great art. This led in the kind of fantastically logical stream of consciousness that was all of Mike's conversation. It led him to Rilke, Walter Benjamin, Wallace Stevens, and the figure of the terrible angel in all their work. We also talked of politics, of course. Mike talked about the slender thread of hope in Syriza. This was shortly before the Greek elections. And this, of course, led to talk of the despair the British left was floundering in and the real possibility of Tories returning to power, which no comment. And we talked about the even deeper despair of Indian politics since last year, since it came to be held hostage by the Hindu right. And we also talked about cinema. Mike drew up a list of films he wanted to watch for the 600th time. Buñuel, Hitchcock, Preminger, and of course, Ford. It was the same loop our conversations had always followed. Art led to politics, politics led to history, history led to cinema, and back again. And through all of this, Mike's mind seemed as inexhaustible as it had ever been, despite the mortal exhaustion of his body. And of course, we also spoke of more personal matters, of his past and present, of people he wished to see, of things he wished to do, of all the things that have to remain unresolved for a life like Mike's to end, so alive and so vibrant and so full of impossible possibilities. Now, towards the end of my visit here, I noticed that on the bedside table beside him, there was a pile of maybe 20 copies of The Price of Experience, which we've heard a lot about today, and which is a remarkable book for anyone here who hasn't read it. Good as the book was, I still wondered why he needed 20 copies of it on the table next to him. And things became clearer when a nurse approached, a nurse who'd come to England from the Philippines, overqualified, underpaid, treated tyrannically by management as NHS workers routinely are. Mike whipped out the book with, I must say, a bit of a flourish, and signed it and handed it to her obvious astonishment. But then that led to 10 or 15 minutes of Mike and the nurse enlightening each other about the history and the evisceration of the NHS that's going on now. And so I'm coming to the point of all this. The point is that when I left Baths for that last time, I left on a high, despite the knowledge that the end was near. The first feeling I had was one of elation. And in a sense, this summed up my experience of Mike over the last decade. Countless times since 2005, as I stepped off the 73 or the 476 bus to walk to Liz and Mike's place, I felt afraid. I felt afraid of the state I'd see Mike in, the physical pain, the anger, the exhaustion of illness and medication combined. But each time I left with the same buzz, the same oddly elated feeling, filled with the sheer luck of knowing him, my mind exploding with everything we talked about and the intensity and insight with which he filled the world. As long as he was alive, and this was what I felt more than anything. And more alive, more engaged with the world on so many levels than I can ever imagine being. And now that's no longer true, now that he's no longer here, I know, as so many of us do, that this is a loss that will take a lifetime to work through. Thanks.
Friends, there could be no greater tribute to Mike than we set ourselves an overambitious target this afternoon. He was somebody who was always very ambitious in his life. We're going to have to finish very quickly because the management of this hall are quite reasonably wanting us to leave at the time we agreed because there are other functions on here this evening. So I'm going to ask the last two speakers, James O'Nions, who with Mike set up the Radical Activist Network and subsequently Iraq Occupation Focus, and Michael Letwin from American Anti-War Campaigner, to come up and give literally, please, very brief messages, then we will stop, okay? Just very brief messages, then we'll stop. Because I understand the problems you've got. And I do want to thank the management of Conway Hall for their cooperation this afternoon, and apologies if we've run slightly over time. So who's going to go first? Please, very brief messages. Nobody?
Good afternoon. I'm Michael Letwin. Thank you. Mike and I did not meet early in his life or mine, but we did meet in the dark days right after 9/11, when Mike visited New York City and sought out those of us from New York City Labor Against the War. And we were so glad to find each other then and in all the years since, and to know Liz and my wife and I, Ellen and I and others, really have appreciated them all this time. We exchanged efforts. He brought me over for the November 2001 anti-war rally in Trafalgar Square. He sent us Jeremy Corbyn to speak at the first U.S. national anti-war rally after 9/11 in 2002. And then Mike himself, we brought him to speak at the New York City February 15th, 2003 rally. And subsequent to that and during that time were common efforts including for Palestine, including defense of Gaza, the BDS movement, Jews for Palestinian right of return, and an unshakable belief in one democratic secular state throughout historic Palestine with equal rights for all. And I just want to briefly read you a message of the kind of hope and I believe spirit that Mike had and that was reflected in today's meeting. He wrote this to me on February 19th, 2013, and it immediately struck me so much of what Trotsky had written just days before his own death in 1940. This is what Mike said. "One thing I feel more certain of than ever is this, that the greatest privilege in my life, apart from the love of those who love me, has been taking part in the global movement for social justice, or whatever we want to call it. For a long time, I was very hung up on the various political failures and disappointments I'd experienced. But whether it's thanks to cancer or just the turning of the world, all those seem pretty minor, though not painless, compared to the scale of our struggle, the scale of the forces lined up against us, and the scale of our goals, human emancipation. I wouldn't have missed this for the world, and I feel sorry for those who have missed out." And that was such an inspiration to hear him say that. And earlier this week, I was at home with Liz and his niece Hannah, who spoke here earlier today, and visited his memorial bench in Stoke Newington, and so strongly felt Mike's presence as I have today, and he will always be here with us. Thank you.
Thanks very much to everyone who's spoken today and everyone who's come along today. I suppose the thing to try and sum all this up, it's just that all of these amazing bits of knowledge that Mike had over all these different areas were all pulled together because there was no point in having all of this knowledge and trying to impart it unless it was trying to change the world as it is now. And as far as he saw it, there was no point in trying to change the world and make the world a better world unless it was a world in which you had all the art and the music and the sport and the cricket and the spliffs and all the other interests he had to enjoy in that better world as well. And so he was very much a man of now, all the time. Mike, everything that he argued, everything that he suggested was about, even if he was talking about the 5th century BC, which was quite possible, it was all about how do we use that knowledge to change things as they are now. And the first thing we have to change as it is now is we've got to get out very quickly and help clear up. Otherwise we will incur the almighty wrath of the good people of the Conway Hall. So thanks very, very much, and long live Mike Marqusee!